just going to say that the thing about these targets that are being hit in all the buildings is that, as you know, very often there are military sites and other sites interspersed in residential areas. The area in Mansour, which in fact we used to live in Baghdad, where they were targeting a restaurant that was believed to be affiliated with the regime, is actually on a main street in a main residential area. Now, it would be impossible not to hit civilian casualties in places like that because it is a very dense city, as you know, and it's really packed with people. It's a huge city. They're very close together, and it was, up until now, a thriving, busy city, and places like that restaurant are just jam-packed next to houses, next to shops. Everything is intermingled.
Securing the bridge for other troops.
Jane, it must seem quite strange to you just to watch, as you saw the tank fire there, to watch this all play out in a city you lived in for a long time.
It is absolutely extraordinary to see the smoke, the tanks, the image of U.S. soldiers in a city that for so long has been so closed and under such an iron grip is absolutely extraordinary. And this is from the perspective of watching it from the outside. For those inside who are actually seeing U.S. soldiers in the street, if they dare to venture outside their homes, it must be absolutely surreal. Now, this is something that a lot of Iraqis had indeed longed for and feared at the same time, and I imagine it's still the case now, that they're watching this play out with a mixture of terror and anticipation, because it really does appear to be unclear. It would be entirely unclear on the ground if you were in your home in Baghdad at this moment what exactly is going to happen.
What is going to happen in the next moment, or how this will all end?
How it will all end, I believe, in conversations with the people that I did live in the city and worked there for some years, they believed that ultimately, if the U.S. were serious, it could come in and change that leadership. What they weren't so confident about was how long, how painful, and how bloody that process might be. And that will still be a fear. People there were incredibly afraid that this could unleash something, that you could never get back into that box, that there would be sectarian violence. And it was very interesting that all of the fears that came out just before this war started, particularly of middle-class Iraqis, middle-class Baghdadis, who consistently expressed the fear that all the people on the outskirts of the city who had been oppressed for so many years, and we're talking about neighborhoods of Shias who had moved there in waves, Shia Muslims, moved in waves from the south, originally to find work in the city. They're now spread around the city in huge communities that had been self-contained. Saddam City, for instance, which had up to 1 million Shias in it, was always thought to be so potentially subversive that it was almost always under virtual military control. There are a lot of fears in the center of Baghdad that if things are unleashed, that if there is a period where there is a power vacuum in Baghdad, that the walls could break open, if you will, that all of these people come flooding into the city, seeking revenge for the years of oppression, seeking revenge for being poor for all of these years. I mean, that's not the view of everyone, but it was a significant fear on the part of a lot of the population in Baghdad. And right now, with the electricity cut off, with not much contact, and apparently people are being prevented from going from their homes. Apparently you need to get a pass to leave your home. This is to prevent a flood of people leaving. So it is very difficult to go outside the house, which would absolutely add to the terror of not knowing what was going on down the block or down the street.
Just about 2.5 hours ago, well, a little longer than that, your friend and colleague, Nick Robertson, reported that the rumor mill in Baghdad, from just talking to his sources, that the rumor mill in Baghdad was working overtime, and that one of the rumors that it was making the rounds is that there was going to be an uprising of some sort and some size in these Shia neighborhoods, which would in some respects might be helpful to the Americans, and in other respects would be terribly complicated depending on whether it was organized or just anarchy.
And it's always been sort of the boogeyman. It's the threat of violence from the Shias, and it's really unclear to anyone how much of that is real and how much is imagined. Now, certainly they have legitimate grievances, and we did see during all the years we were in Baghdad uprisings very quickly put down in places like Saddam City, that Shia neighborhood on the edge of Baghdad. Now, it's basically, we can't put it too politely, it's a slum. People live in horrible conditions. They're crammed together. It's probably one of the poorest parts of Baghdad, and it is a place that is just, with the right spark, could be waiting to explode. Now, that is always a possibility and has always been a possibility, even before this war started. For instance, when Shia clerics were being killed under mysterious circumstances, essentially assassinated, there had been some riots in Saddam City that were very quickly suppressed, with people being killed and the riots put down. It was, as you know, Aaron, a very effective regime, very effectively in control. So the question has always been, what happens when you lift that control? And the feeling is that U.S. troops coming in are not going to replace those decades of iron control by Iraqi troops, and that extremely effective interlocked system of Iraqi secret police, the web of informers, the Republican Guard, the Ba'ath Party. That's the reason he survived so long, that it was extremely effective. Now, people do fear and have feared for some time that it could result in Shia violence against Sunnis, but at the end of the day, it really depends on what else is happening on the ground, whether there's a power vacuum or whether the American troops and their allies can go in and stabilize things. And right now, the feeling is that it could really very much go either way. Aaron?
Jane, just stay with us here for as long as you can. That's Jane Arraf, who for a long time was the CNN bureau chief in Baghdad, and she has been covering the war from northern Iraq. Reem Brahimi was part of the CNN crew that was not so politely asked to leave Baghdad now a couple of weeks ago. She is in Amman, and she has been watching this from Amman, and she joins us on the phone. Reem?
Yes, Aaron. Well, you can see those tanks on the bridge heading clearly from the west side of the river, which is where most of the government buildings are, to the eastern side of that river, clearly trying to make its way to gather a little more ground, as it were, in Baghdad. Now, we saw earlier on pictures of the Ministry of Planning on fire. It used to be the offices of the Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz and the Vice President Taha Yassin Ramadan. This new picture again showing a bridge. I understand the Al Jazeera building may have been hit. It's a house that hosts a lot of Arab media, but mainly, of course, at Al Jazeera. It's in fact a production company that owns the house and let's say hosts the Al Jazeera reporters and crew there. Apparently, one journalist was seriously injured and another one just slightly injured, and we're hoping to bring you more details on that, Aaron, as soon as we get them. Aaron?
Okay, Reem, just stay with us here. It certainly did look like fire came against the cement or brick of that building, and there's also obviously an American plane in the sky.
نعم، قد اطمأن منذ دقائق أن الجميع نزل على الأرض، لم يعد أحد على السطح.
Different angle coming again across the river. There are two American tanks. You can see them on the river. And there was a very large explosion just a moment ago. Reem, you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm watching. There's a huge explosion on that other side of the bridge, near that building.
These buildings, these low-rise buildings, do you recognize them? Do you know what they are?
Seen from this angle, I would need to have the... If I could have the camera pulled out, it would be nice. But okay. I would need to have a bigger view. It looks like from that direction there has to be something that links them to those government buildings. The one we saw earlier on, Aaron, the Ministry of Planning, is an interesting building because it was hit in the first 3 days of the bombing, and it was totally on fire. In fact, you could see that fire rage all day at one point. And they had blocked the road so that people couldn't actually pass by it and see it from too close, but you could see it from the other side of the river. And so it's interesting that it's been again bombed, because one would wonder what there could still be in there.
When this all began for us, when we saw these pictures come up on Abu Dhabi TV, the report was that there was fire of some sort coming from that building or that area, presumably that building.
It's an area that's not far also where the new offices of the Deputy Prime Minister and the Vice President offices are. So it's an area with there's a concentration, if you will, Aaron, of government buildings. And when that building was bombed, the blow from the explosion there also affected the sort of commercial area in the neighborhood. So as you drove past that area, you could see all the shop windows blown out.
As Abu Dhabi TV, the correspondents have described it, this has been an area of many snipers in these high-rise buildings firing down on the Americans. There's these 2 American tanks on the bridge. It is, as you can see, the turret there turning, going up, down, and around.
Yeah.
An American fighter jet in the sky, pretty much owning the sky. We saw a couple of hours ago, hour and a half ago, an A-10, a very kind of clunky but tough airplane working the sky without any particular fear. It may in fact have been responsible for some of the fire that you saw in that building on the top floor.
But the tanks are still seem to be not moving forward, or moving very, very slowly.
They're just holding their position. Reem, stay with us now. I want to switch phone lines, which takes just a second, and bring Jane Arraf back in.
States, because it will illustrate that there is a desire now to take more territory inside Baghdad. Perhaps a desire to try and prevent the Minister of Information from holding another one of those news conferences on the eastern banks of the Tigris at the Palestine Hotel, where Chris Yumpelt and various other correspondents in Baghdad are holed up. Now, what you're looking at here is about a mile to the east of the Mansour district, where we believe Saddam Hussein and other senior members of the Iraqi leadership were targeted by the United States B-1s earlier on, by those bunker-busting bombs a little bit earlier on. So this is all about a mile to the west, to the east rather, of the Mansour district. You can see there on the map the Mansour go about half an inch to the right, and that's where we're looking at all this action. We've been debating in the last several days at what point can one say the battle for Baghdad is underway. I think that we can probably say pretty definitively now that the battle for Baghdad is underway. A little bit earlier on, you saw a building aflame and ablaze in these pictures that we're getting from Abu Dhabi television. Our team here, producer Zoran Kusevats and correspondent Greg Palcott, tell me that that is the Ministry of Planning building. It was apparently fired on by Bradleys, US Bradleys, using 25mm chain guns, and those chain guns are able to fire incendiary devices into buildings, which could then create the fires that we're seeing in the Ministry of Planning. Now, that ministry again is right in the heart of that area on the western banks of the Tigris River that houses, among other things, the Deputy Prime Minister's office, Tariq Aziz's office, which we know has been hammered by US airstrikes since this war began, the Council of Ministers building, the Ministry of Information, or whatever is currently left of it, and if you expand that just a little bit further, you'd include the National Assembly, the Parliament building as well. But there's a real battle now going on to control that section of western Baghdad, and seemingly now to get get U.S. tanks to cross the river and move into eastern Baghdad. So these events could be extremely important in the battle for Baghdad. And of course, we don't want to overlook the fact that about a mile to the west, that building in the Mansour district, a very stylish part of Baghdad where Saddam Hussein and senior members of his government were reportedly meeting today, is now a large crater in the ground and could, within the next 2 or 3 days, yield information that tells us definitively whether Saddam Hussein was indeed killed last night in Baghdad, yesterday afternoon in Baghdad, by U.S. bombers. Laurie?
Simon, we're hearing Al Jazeera and Abu Dhabi TV are both reporting that they have both been hit in Baghdad. Now, of course, we've been running video from Al Jazeera. We've been taking live pictures from Abu Dhabi within our own broadcast. In fact, they just went off our air just a couple of seconds ago. What are you hearing about that?
Well, Abu Dhabi is definitely still on the air. I can actually see it from here.
Sure.
And they have their correspondent reporting live now from the Palestine Hotel, which is where they have some kind of a facility. Their offices, the offices of Al Jazeera and Abu Dhabi, were not at the Palestine Hotel. They were in a sort of a park, a fairly exposed area on the western banks of the Tigris. And when we were in Baghdad 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was notable that as you drove past those offices of Abu Dhabi TV, every day the sign on the outside of the building and on its roof saying Abu Dhabi TV in large lettering grew larger and larger and larger, which seemed to be an indication to us that Abu Dhabi television was trying to say to the spies up in the sky, to the satellites, look, we are here, please leave us alone, we are a broadcaster, don't hit us. Tonight it seems that as this battle rages for control of the western sector of Baghdad, indeed the Al Jazeera office has certainly been hit, and we saw that very dramatic footage a couple of minutes ago with the Abu Dhabi cameraman also seeming to lose control momentarily over his camera as some kind of explosion or sniper fire hit their position as well. So this section of Baghdad, it's safe to say tonight, is not a secure place to be in, and yet by contrast, just a mile away on the other side of the river, Chris Yumpelt and the other reporters in the Palestine Hotel are surrounded by relative tranquility in that section of the city. It's an extraordinary dichotomy, Laurie.
It certainly is, one that you pointed out very well. Simon Marks in Amman, Jordan, thank you very much for the update. We'll be checking back in with you later. I'd like to go now to my panel here in New York.
7th Marines, this was an objective, this warehouse complex here, industrial complex. It is a myriad of acres that are covered with factories, with warehouses, and other industrial sites. So just imagine an industrial park anywhere outside of Iraq, and, well, you know what it looks like here. And they have literally been going from building to building, factory to factory, warehouse to warehouse, and they have been getting some opposition. Now, it was not just the opposition that brought them here. It was also the fact that because it is an industrial complex, there was some question, apparently intelligence, indicating there might be sensitive material here, and that some of these industries might have been involved in clandestine weapons making or the manufacture of anything that might be related to weapons of mass destruction. Those warehouses are being inspected and looked at this particular time. More rounds going off here. That's why our heads jerk in that direction. But for the most part, they say they have it under control. They have been fighting it more aggressively in this urban area because there are not many civilians here. It is primarily an opposition force that they meet, and there have been casualties on the Iraqi side. None have been taken on the Marine side so far, Aaron.
And Marty, do you know who it is they are fighting? Are they fighting Republican Guard? Are they fighting irregulars? Are they fighting who?
Well, I don't know by name who they are fighting. It is an irregular force, simply measured by the amount of fire that they put out and their capability. We have not heard heavy weapons. We haven't heard things like artillery. Might have been occasional mortar fire and certainly machine gun fire, but the Marines are responding with an overwhelming force, heavy machine gun fire, anti-tank missiles, as well as tanks that are down in that complex, and armored personnel carriers returning fire. That is always standard practice. Marines say if you are firing upon a Marine, you can expect to receive tenfold in return, and that is their way of suppressing and saying, don't do that again. So they are carefully going through this complex. It's going to take some time. They've also found on site here, just out of interest, a soft drink bottling factory, a brewery, and a cigarette factory as well that is mixed in amongst this sort of myriad of buildings. So there was a lot for the Marines to go through. Obviously, those three I mentioned not high on the priority list. There are other buildings that are taking more intensive look at by these forces.
Marty, just say, is Jane still on the phone?
I am. Hello.
Jane, are you able to tell, there's not much of a shot there to see, are you able to tell where he is? Do you know the area?
I had seen just in the earlier shot on the right-hand side of the screen, as you're looking towards it, just the edge of the Prime Ministry building, former offices of Tariq Aziz, the building that had been hit. It's that huge building on the ground level that has perhaps 5 or 6 floors, and then a tower, almost a tower above it. To the right of it, it would be just at the beginning of a bridge. Late last year, they had put up an extraordinary statue next to that building. It was Saddam Hussein with his hand raised in the air with a gun, firing a rifle into the air. And it was one of many such statues that had gone up, a symbol of Iraqi defiance, a symbol of President Saddam Hussein's defiance as these threats of war gathered. That appears to be where that is. Looking off into the distance, we're looking into the city. It's hard to tell from this shot, Aaron, but it was quite clear just a moment ago that on the edge of that was the shot of the Prime Ministry building.
Jane, you weren't able to tell what that complex of warehouses was that Martin Savage was reporting from, where the Marines are, this industrial complex with the cigarette factory and who knows what else, this huge industrial park, for lack of a better word, in the southeast part, southwest.
That's correct, yeah. We're told that this whole area here, not just this complex, but this region that we are pushing into is sort of the industrialized part of Baghdad itself. And one of the reasons you move in this area, obviously, is in support of coming up from the east. The other is there are a lot of, apparently, sites here that they're very interested in taking a look at. We understand that there are other Marines working on other objectives today. I'm not quite clear I can report on those just yet, but there have been other significant gains that have been made today beyond just going into this complex.
Was there, among the Marines you're traveling with, when it was clear that they had entered Baghdad proper, they're pretty busy guys right now, was there any reaction to that?
No, I'm not sure if they know officially. This has been one of those goals that you've been driving to get to for so long, you ever wonder if you're going to get there. There was no sort of rousing cheer, no sort of marking of the moment of crossing into Baghdad. I wasn't aware of it until I looked on the map and was meeting with the colonel. So I don't think the Marines are fully aware that they are inside of Baghdad. They've always been told they're getting close. Maybe the news will sink in a little bit later. I don't think it's really that significant to them until they start seeing something they recognize as a city. Right now, what they're looking at is just one big industrialized area, Aaron.
Every soldier in the country, every Marine in the country, every American, and I suspect every British soldier too, and British Marine, has been told the road home goes through Baghdad. That's how you get home from this thing. And you would think just the fact that you have made it that far would mean something.
Well, it's a long way for the Marines. As you know, this is the farthest the Marines have ever gone away from shore in any sort of conflict. So that just getting here alone, logistically, mechanically, and militarily, is a tremendous achievement on the part of the Marines, aside from whatever successes they may have achieved on the battlefield. The fact that they have come this far has never before happened in the history of the whole Marine Corps. So that's significant unto itself. And yes, as you know, the Marines realize that going home, you have to go through here first. The closer they've gotten, well, then they feel the closer they're getting to home. No one is saying it is over yet, but you do hear casual conversations about things like, well, I wonder how we're going to get all the vehicles back, and I guess we have to drive all the way back to Kuwait before they can actually go home. So their minds, still focused on the fight, beginning to dream a little bit about home.
Marty, explain for our viewers that in how, in a sense, the Marines are set up differently from the Army. It is about they've traveled about 350 miles, and that's a long way for the Marines to set up supply lines. They're not set up that way?
No, well, they're set up with supply lines, but a little bit differently. A Marine unit, say an expeditionary force, which might be about 2,200 individuals, the Marines always like to have everything they need with them In other words, that they don't set up a situation where they pull forward and then say, oh, we should have had some bridges, or oh, we should have had more aviation assets, or we should have had this. They design each of the MUs, as they call those, to be independent fighting forces, so that everything they need, whether it be the old beans, bullets, and the bandages, they've got everything with them, and anything they believe they need travels with them at all times. Now, resupply, of course, has to come from northern Kuwait, and that is what has been coming as far as the food and the fuel and sometimes ammunition. But as far as being able to sustain themselves in the field, they travel at all times with at least enough to fight for 15 to 30 days at a time. And that is one of the significant differences between, say, how the Army operates with a huge logistics train in trail behind them. The Marines push and pull everything forward with them as they go.
And one of the things about this operation for both the Marines and the Army that has made it complicated is that it is a long supply line. Just, Marty, so you're aware, and you'll know the term, we've got a big little up, and in the big screen we can see an American jet over Baghdad. There are 2 American tanks on a bridge, and your colleague Jane Arraf is on the phone as well. So just to get you caught up on where we are, there's a lot going on the screen right now. And can you see that plane up there?
Well, there are planes overhead. I mean, I was just wondering whether it was, in fact, the same aircraft. I can't see it with the overcast we have here. But you mentioned it, and no sooner had you said it, there's one overhead.
We talked, all of us, Marty, you did, and all of us talked last week about what urban warfare might be like once the Americans got there. Now the Marines are there, the Army's been there, and we are watching on our screen at least one form of urban combat. These 2 American tanks on the bridge, a planning ministry on fire. Jane, what are we looking at there? Can you, if you can still...
Aaron, I'm afraid I'm probably seeing a slightly different picture than you are. Okay. What I am seeing is that square with the mosque behind it, very close to the Palestine Meridian Hotel.
Okay,
which is where the
that is also what we're seeing, Jane. That's also what we're looking at.
Okay, this is a lot of smoke in the sky. Obviously, it's a small mosque that was renamed after one of the revolutions. It's a lovely jewel-like mosque, and just in the foreground, what we're seeing is something that sort of defined Saddam Hussein's improvements of Baghdad, his unification after the war, and continuing. It's a series of pillars, and each one of them actually has his initials carved into it, a feature of his architecture, actually. He likes to put his stamp on things. There had been a statue of him. We were actually at the inauguration of that statue. There were sheep slaughtered, Ba'ath Party officials. It was quite an amazing occasion, obviously a very different picture now. And this appears to be taken from the Palestine Meridian Hotel, where journalists had relocated to after they fled the Rashid Hotel, which appears to be more of a target. Aaron?
Jane was the bureau chief in Baghdad for a good long while and was expelled, but is now in the northern part of the country and has been reporting from there on the Kurdish forces and their efforts. Her colleague in Baghdad, Reem Brahimi, also expelled from the country, is watching all of this unfold from her perch in Amman, Jordan. And Reem is on the phone.
Aaron, you can see in front there the mosque that's right across from the Palestine Hotel, which is where all the journalists stay. And there's a place there that was actually the statue of Saddam Hussein was unveiled recently. There are fountains there. Typically on a summer evening, children would go and play, and families will go and camp out and picnic on the grass there. That area is there are much less government buildings, but there are also quite a few buildings belonging to the secret services or various intelligence corps in that area.
Cautious, however, because the one thing that would destroy U.S. and coalition credibility at this hour would be if Saddam Hussein pops up on TV somewhere, which is always a possibility. But look at that hole. It's there.
and it's just across the river, interestingly enough, from the palace where all the activity took place yesterday, and where the U.S. troops made their incursion. Interestingly enough, this is why when the information minister, Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, spoke to reporters, you could literally see the fire burning in the palace behind him across the river while he was denying the presence of U.S. troops in his country.
This is, just stay with me, Reem. Stay with us. This is, excuse me, this is tape now of what occurred about 45 minutes or so ago. That we believe is, Reem, correct, that's the planning ministry. She's not seen, okay, got it. The planning ministry building, and it was hit several times and rocked. And then over the next 35 minutes or so, fire breaks out on the top floor and on a lower floor, a floor 3 floors down from the top. There was some shooting coming back at the Americans from this building, but it certainly may well have been targeted anyway. It is a government building. A blast from one of the 2 American tanks. And again, these pictures are taped. At this moment, that building is burning. How much of it is in flames, we don't know, because that, I believe that's the camera, the Abu Dhabi camera that got taken out in some way. The cameraman's okay, but there was gunfire at that balcony where that camera is perched, and we have not seen that camera since. So what you're looking at is tape from about 45 minutes or so ago. It's always hard when looking at these things to know how exactly they will resolve. This could go on for hours. Martin Savage has been involved in this clearing of an industrial complex. That could go on for hours and hours. So it's not clear how these things ever exactly resolve. But no one doubts that eventually they resolve in the Americans' favor. The Americans have so much more firepower than do the Iraqis on the ground. They can bring to bear air and have in this. They can bring in these heavy tanks and the Bradleys, and there are, from the reporting we've heard just earlier, you're down to, on the Iraqi side, just a few dozen tanks that haven't been destroyed. You can just see in the smoke there, just barely see in the smoke in the center of your screen, the 2 American tanks. And that makes it a lot easier to see when they fire that way. Reem, I know you are not, Reem, looking at exactly what we're...
Who surrenders to us now? What happens next? And who's left?
Well,
if we got the main guys in the bunker, if we got Saddam, his sons, and the Dirty Dozen and more, what's left?
Laurie, who surrendered to us in Afghanistan? And all of a sudden there becomes a void there. And in the void, we have to fill in this void, or this vacuum has to be filled in with leadership. And we start bringing in, we have to make certain that the skirmishes up north with the 173rd Airborne and fighting for Model and everything else, all those things are, were brought into play here. The fighting out in the west with the 75th Infantry as they're coming forth, the 82nd, 101st, we have to get all our people together. And then we already have appointed someone who is going to be, kind of the minister of reconstruction and rebuilding bridges and telecommunications and all the things that are necessary. And that's what happens next. And then we start bringing people to the table that have a respected constituency, as Mansour is pointing out, and they start establishing why they should be at the table. They haven't been at the table. So you have the leaders of the Kurds, you have the leaders of the Shiite Muslims, you have the leaders of the Sunni Muslims, all these different people, and there are other minorities there within Iraq that haven't been to the table for a number of years. And that's what happens now. We have to put the leadership vacuum has to be filled. And the military vacuum, we did a great job with.
If we didn't get him tonight, then what?
Well, if we didn't get him tonight...
We'll get him at some point?
No, we didn't get, and we didn't know about getting Hitler. We didn't know about getting a number of people. In many, many wars, the top guy, he exited stage left. I mean, I don't know how many times Napoleon did his exile, forced exile, he was gone, and people would bring these people back. So one of the worries about a forced exile is that oftentimes these people do reemerge. So I think they wouldn't have this much information going out. I'll be candid with you. The NSA and the CIA and the Pentagon would be somewhat stutter-stepping, and they may be calling the bosses of this organization and other organizations saying,
back off.
You guys are going way too far here now, so slow up. So I really do think that there's a good possibility we got him.
All right, well, speaking of the Pentagon, that is where Kelly Wright is standing by at 2:04 a.m. Eastern Time. And Kelly, if you would kind of bring our viewers up to date on exactly what's going on there right now, what's been coming out of the Pentagon, a very busy late night for everybody there.
Well, Laura, you're right. It has been a very busy and late night with all of these breaking details about Saddam Hussein and his two sons, Uday and Qusay. I must tell you that the Pentagon officials here tell Fox News that they were acting, or at least the coalition airstrike was acting upon credible ground evidence and intelligence reports that Saddam Hussein and his two sons actually were involved in some sort of high-level meeting with the Iraqi regime at that particular restaurant or house there at the Al Mansour district. And as a result of that, the airstrike was called in. We're looking at video of that now. The intelligence report happened early in the afternoon at 3 p.m. Baghdad time. About an hour after receiving that report, a B-1 strike was called in following the intelligence report. 4 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs were dropped on the target. That's about 8,000 pounds of munitions. It happened in an area at what defense officials say was a house and a restaurant in an upscale residential area of the Al Mansour district. Now, there are intelligence reports that Saddam and his sons Uday and Qusay were planning to leave Baghdad and had been meeting to discuss plans with other Iraqi leaders to determine some sort of strategy to actually get out of town. The bombing took place in broad daylight at 3 p.m. Baghdad time, as I said. That's 7 a.m. Eastern time here in the United States. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld held a 2 p.m. briefing on Monday. At the time of that briefing, he was already aware of the strike, and it's interesting what he had to say during his opening statement.
The regime's leaders are increasingly isolated. The circle is closing, and their options are running out. As his regime collapses around him, the question is asked, where is he? There are three possibilities. He's either dead or injured or not willing to show himself.
Pentagon sources say the area has a huge crater where the bombs hit. Defense officials also say that they will not completely know if Saddam and his sons were killed in this strike until they can sift through the rubble to determine if Saddam and his sons were actually there. And as we look at live video now, if we can go to the live video of what's happening in Baghdad, there is a lot of events taking place, unfolding even as we speak in Baghdad. 2 U.S. Abrams tanks advanced onto a bridge in central Baghdad on Tuesday, in full view of Iraqi defenders. And we also understand that, according to defense officials here, this is going on because there's a lot of noise going on in the theater. There is an overarching principle, according to these defense officials here at the Pentagon, to target military targets while avoiding civilian casualties at all costs. And that's why we're seeing the continued ground and air strikes going on right there in the heart of Baghdad as the coalition continues to move in to take down the Iraqi regime. Lori?
All right. Kelly Wright at the Pentagon, thanks very much for the update. We're going to be talking to you a little later. And Brian, let's go back to you in Washington. You know, it really is extraordinary how every night we say the story is changing every 5 minutes. And
It dips out a lot. It's kind of low-flying, a little clunky. It's not the most nimble of airplanes. It flies low, it's very durable, and it is providing what military people would call close air support. It gets close, and it's got these 23mm cannons, and it is a workhorse. Remember, just a week or so ago, Bob Franken, who was at an air base in Iraq, correspondent Bob Franken, talking about these A-10s going out after tanks. They are workhorses, but they are not sprinters out there. And so you need an environment that is very safe for them. They do have flares to deflect missiles fired at them, but they don't have much maneuverability up there, and they can be vulnerable. And the fact that they're operating in broad daylight under these conditions gives you some idea of how confident the Americans are that they totally own the sky now, that there's really very little, if any, or much of a threat. There's obviously some threat, but very little. There's obviously some threat because there are in the world today, and certainly in Iraq, hundreds and hundreds of shoulder-launched missiles that, in an unlucky moment for an American pilot in an A-10, could bring it down. But these are very sturdy planes, these A-10s. Chris Dickey is the Mideast bureau chief for Newsweek magazine, and we were going to talk to him actually a bit ago, and we've all been caught up in this moment, but he's with us now, and we'll bring him in now. Chris, we'll just keep an eye on what's unfolding here because there's no reason to believe it's going to resolve. The last time we talked to you, I believe it was a Saturday or a Sunday very early in the war, and your view was very pessimistic of how the Arab community would react to it all. Are you any less pessimistic now? Have you seen anything in the last 2 weeks that have changed your view?
Well, no, not really. I think that there are a couple of important things to remember about what's happening right now. We may own the skies, and we may have tanks in Baghdad, and we may have a lot of desert under American control, but very little of the Iraqi population is under control. And as the U.S. moves to try and bring more and more populated areas under coalition supervision, control, policing, there's likely to be a lot of low-intensity conflict and a lot of civilians getting killed. The attack today on this supposed command meeting is in Mansour. It's sort of like hitting Chevy Chase or Bethesda. You're going to wipe out a lot of civilians in an operation like that, and already the civilian casualties have mounted tremendously over the last 3 or 4 days as the U.S. has been moving into Baghdad. All of that plays with Arab public opinion in an extremely negative way, because while Americans are looking at a story of victory, the rest of the world, especially the Arab and Muslim world, is looking at a story of victims. And that's still creating an enormous divide that we're going to be living with for a long time.
So while Americans may take some considerable satisfaction in that many Americans may take some satisfaction in this attack that was designed to get Saddam Hussein and perhaps his sons and perhaps many of the leaders of the government and perhaps some intelligence officials, the rest of the world, particularly the Arab world, is going to say yes, but they dropped 4 2,000-pound bombs in a neighborhood.
Well, exactly, especially if there's no proof that the Americans got the guys they were going after. I mean, you've seen the video of that crater. You know what it looks like. It's bigger than a swimming pool. And if Saddam was in there, he's probably just some sticky stuff at the bottom. it's going to be very hard to prove to the Iraqi people or to the Arab people that Saddam is really dead, even if he was in that building. And that's why the administration, that's why the Pentagon is being very tentative about this. The last thing they want to do at this stage is say, yeah, we got the guy, and then have him pop up on TV a day or 2 or 3 from now, a little bit the way Osama did over time, Osama bin Laden.
And for different reasons, it's important to, there are different reasons why the Arab world at large would need to see results, if you will, and from the Iraqi people might react differently if they knew Saddam was dead or the regime was dead. The strategy, Chris, as you know, is predicated on the idea that the Iraqis will, once they are sure that the regime has fallen, will welcome the Americans in celebration.
Well, yeah, but you know, welcome doesn't seem like an appropriate word anymore, does it? I mean, the war's almost 3 weeks old. The U.S. has moved all through Iraq into various parts of Iraq. It hasn't actually been welcomed anywhere it's been. It's being tolerated. The troops now, the British troops, are being tolerated in Basra. They're not being welcomed. The U.S. presence is being tolerated in Najaf. They're not being welcomed. So it's a question, you know, when they think the witch is dead, when they think Saddam is completely gone, are they going to erupt in jubilation? Maybe briefly, but this is a whole different proposition than anyone expected going into this war. It's a much less comfortable situation for the United States than was hoped for, certainly by a lot of people who advocated this measure.
So, Chris, you think that this notion that of the last 2 weeks, really, that the administration and the Pentagon both have been saying that once they're sure that Saddam is dead, then they will celebrate. But right now, as a British commander put it last week, we're still someone on probation. Do you think that notion is oversold?
Well, I think the idea of people pouring out of the streets and celebrating is oversold. I think there is going to be some of that. But there are a lot of things working here. First of all, it's just the reign of terror of Saddam that's existed really for about 35 years. You know, before you can talk about democracy for the Iraqi people, you're going to have to talk about deprogramming them. They've had this built into them, this reign of fear. So that's one thing. But there's another thing. It's just basic honor, dignity, pride that is under assault by a foreign invasion, especially an invasion by what are essentially Christian troops. That's not taken too kindly here. In terms of the rest of the Arab world, they look at what's going on in Iraq and they say, oh yeah, we've seen that before. That looks exactly like the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory, or reoccupation that's taken place over the last year. So it's just not playing out very well politically. And the thing to keep in mind about this war constantly is that it's not just a military war. Our troops have done a great job. The battle plan is clearly a brilliant plan, very well adapted to American resources and very well adapted to crushing any kind of strong military resistance.
One or two other things. Is the United States, are U.S. interests in worse shape 3 weeks later than they were on the 19th of March in the Arab world?
Oh, I think so. I think so.
And how does that manifest itself?
A lot of change. Well, I think you're going to see a lot of changes. It's like a cataclysm for the Arab world. This is, even for American friends, this is a kind of a humiliating experience. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who sort of said, well, you know, this is really humiliating and I'm really, really angry, but, well, what can we do? We'll have to go with it. We'll have to make the best of it one way or another. The idea in Washington, in some circles in Washington, is that's all you can hope for, because the Arabs are never going to like us anyway. They're always going to hate us anyway. They're always going to hate Israel anyway. But it doesn't create an environment that really is peaceful and stable. It creates an environment of tolerance, acquiescence, and anger. And eventually that erupts in unpredictable ways. The most obvious way, of course, is with terrorism, and terrorism against Americans almost anywhere in the world. But I wouldn't expect to see that for a little while now. There's going to be a little breathing space. If the U.S. can, I don't want to go on here too long, Aaron, but if the U.S. can really turn this around very quickly on the ground once Saddam is gone, if they can create a credible government, if they can build the confidence of the Iraqi people, then there is some hope. But I don't see a lot of indication that there has been enough thought and enough effort, and that there's enough staying power and enough ability in the United States to carry out that program.
And just help me understand what turn it around quickly means. Are we talking 6 months, 3 months, or 2 years?
Well, a lot has to do with the patience of the United States. You know, you go in, you occupy a country, especially a country as complex as Iraq, and what you want to do, the objectives of that occupation in terms of American official policy are to keep Iraq unified, keep the people from tearing it apart by fighting each other, and at the same time try and build some kind of democratic framework. And the real risk for the United States is that instead of stabilizing the country, it will simply walk into the middle of all these intramural fights between Kurds, Shia, Sunni, within the Shia community, within the Sunni community, and that all of a sudden, just as the Israelis found they were in Lebanon in 1983, and the Americans too, we will become the enemy rather than the liberator, and we will be the enemy of any faction that we're not supporting. So how long to stay? Do we stay until it's stable, or do we do what we did in Lebanon and in other places? Finally decide, a pox on all their houses, let's walk away, good luck guys, we're not going to stay here and get blown up anymore.
Well, if that were to happen, that would be a stunning outcome, Chris, in all of this. Chris Dickey, the Mideast Bureau Chief of Newsweek magazine. General Don Shepard is on the line, and he has been watching this play out, and these things always look different to our analysts, our military analysts. What have you been seeing, General?
Well, I've been watching the air picture that you've been watching on your screen there, Aaron, and what you've got is repeated attacks, or at least repeated passes by an A-10 or a flight of A-10s more than likely on targets. Now, these people are definitely in radio contact with the Air Force forward air controller embedded with the Army or the Marines, depending on where the target is. The flares that you saw coming out earlier are there. Sometimes they're precautionary. Sometimes they are what we call pickled off, or you press a button and they dispense because you see yourself being attacked by a shoulder-fired missile, or the forward air controller on the ground will tell you chaff, which means hit the chaff button, which dumps flares and chaff, because he sees a rocket being fired at you that you can't see yourself. Also, precautionary, you'll dump them on as you make your approach, and then on pull-off. Your words about the A-10 are right on. It's a 30-millimeter Gatling gun that'll pierce armor. It appears that they are strafing with that gun to me as I listen to it and watch it. And it's very maneuverable and very tough. It'll take small arms fire, but one shoulder-fired rocket can bring this thing down, so it's dangerous, and they're making low passes.
And these, when we see the flares come off it, that is to literally confuse the rocket if it's fired, or to confuse the person firing the rocket?
No, to make it very simple, what it does is decoy. It's the infrared shoulder-fired missile is fired at the airplane because the airplane is hotter than the background of the sky. So it tracks that hot spot from the airplane engines. The idea behind the flares is to dump out behind the airplane. They're hotter than the airplane, and the shoulder-fired missile goes for the flare rather than the airplane is the idea.
Okay, General, stay with us for a minute. Nick Robertson is on the line. Nick, are you able to get calls in through to Baghdad?
I've been on the line with Baghdad this morning. First time we talked was just after sunrise this morning, and I've been keeping in touch with what's been going on there with my sources there and the pictures we've been seeing, yes.
And what are you seeing in all of this? What do you think the ultimate target is here?
What I'm seeing is the coalition extend its area of operation in Baghdad. We've seen them on the first day arrive at the airport. We've seen them the next day probe into town and withdraw. We saw them yesterday probe into the government area, into Presidential Palace area on the west banks of the Tigris, hold that position. Then this morning we saw two of the Abrams tanks pull out over that Al Jumeirah bridge as if to go over to the east bank of the Tigris. Very much they're pulling out, then they pull back, they put themselves on display. They also appear to target what they thought was a hostile position which turned out to be a camera position looking at them, giving us those close pictures, the coaxial gun chipping up the cement just beneath the camera, and then a large explosion just in front of the camera a minute or so later. But it very much appears as what the coalition is doing, what it said it set out to do in the city, which is not to threaten the population, but to show the population they're there, show them that they intend to stay, show the Iraqi leadership that they are beginning to control more and more of the city. It's not clear if they intend to cross over the bridge into the eastern side of Baghdad. Certainly that would be a different operating environment for them. The area they've been in until now has been fairly wide roads, fairly open ground to a degree around the presidential palace area, government buildings, but again a fairly open area. If they cross that bridge, they'll get into a much more residential area, tighter streets, higher buildings around them. Normally would be a very busy shopping area, but it would put them in a different, potentially different environment, but it would definitely put them in ground they haven't been on yet. That's their stated purpose, to take control of more areas of the city and send a psychological message to the Iraqi leadership that they're there to stay. They intend to control more of the ground, but not try and get drawn into urban fighting with the Fedayeen and Republican Guard. And what we've seen this morning by just probing out on the bridge, not going over the cusp of the bridge and pull back, perhaps the early stages of that. But very definitely those Abrahams putting themselves on display for the population east of the river there in Baghdad, a population that hasn't visibly seen them yet themselves. And we know from our sources talking to people in the city yesterday, they were all in the city of Baghdad very surprised at how little opposition the Republican Guard had put up to the coalition forces, and the people of the city figuring that their leadership has not been telling them the whole truth up until now, Aaron.
Okay, Nick, I know you're not able to see the pictures that are rolling now, so let me just explain again. This is tape, and that was something that Nick described just a bit ago at the camera location where the Abu Dhabi TV cameraman was. He is not there anymore. He is okay, but Al Jazeera is now reporting that one of its reporters was killed, has died in this airstrike in Baghdad this morning, now Tuesday morning in the city. The Abu Dhabi TV cameraman, was quite honestly was lucky to get out with his life, as you could see from that explosion. Here, this is a while back, we believe the Al Jazeera employee, correspondent, being taken out, and they were trying to get him medical attention, and you'll see that they put him in a station wagon or a four-wheel drive that has press markings on it. But Al Jazeera now reporting that one of its reporters has died. And Nick, briefly, if you will, I know you can't follow all these tape pictures, but briefly, the Al Jazeera building is where in proximity to what we've been watching?
Well, Aaron, if you don't mind, if I just take a moment to say, I don't know which of the Al Jazeera correspondents have died, but over my time in Baghdad, I've become very close to some of them and know them very well. They're very good colleagues, and my heart goes out to them and their families at this time. This is obviously deeply disturbing to know one of one's friends and colleagues has died.
Nick,
their location was very close to the bridge, where their location, Aaron, was very close to the bridge where the two tanks were. It was closer than it was between the Abu Dhabi television's location and the bridge where the two tanks were, Aaron.
Okay. The reporter's name, according to Al Jazeera, was Tariq Aboud, and he has died in this conflict. Another reporter, as that number grows.
Indeed, this is a very costly war for journalists as well as the combatants as well, Aaron, indeed.
Well, it is that. It's been a bad 3 or 4 days now for journalists, and obviously the closer journalists are allowed to come, the greater the risk, though not all of these deaths have come in combat or because of hostile exchanges. Michael Kelly last week died in an auto accident. David David Bloom died David Bloom of NBC died of what appear to be natural causes. But it is a high price that news organizations are paying, and Chris, this is Chris Dickey of Newsweek. We've got about 2 minutes here before we...
They may have been trying to prevent the pictures coming. It sounds like to me this camera was directly behind an enemy machine gun position and therefore may have just gotten in the way of what was going on there. I mean, clearly, we don't know. We're not there. But it's hard for us to draw any other conclusion except that that camera was in harm's way and may have gotten caught in the crossfire. There the shells come up again. There you see another explosion. Then the camera falls over on its side. Now, we regret, of course, that there may have been the loss of life here, but this is a war zone, and these camera people who go into a war zone understand that there is a risk to be taken any time. Now, notice again, as the tape continues to play out, there is another incident that occurs just a short time. We see a picture of that bridge, and we see a tank on the bridge. There again, the machine gun apparently firing just below the vision of this camera, and then the camera falls over. And then we see a picture of an aircraft coming in. In a moment, it shifts back to another scene. You see that bridge, you see that tank, you know there's a plane in the air, and then any moment now, there is a massive explosion. Watch it. Any second now, here it comes. A big explosion. There it is, the F-14 in the air, and now an explosion. Now, it would seem to me that U.S. forces on the ground, at least in the initial blush, were going after what appeared to be an enemy machine gun position. It is hard for us to draw a perfect conclusion, but before we draw any conclusion, let's point out the possibility that, in fact, this cameraman happened to be right behind an enemy position. And when you're behind an enemy position, unfortunately, you can get hurt. We regret, of course, that we have lost even a member of our journalistic corps from Al Jazeera, but it is a tough environment, and this man knew full well the risk he was taking. Let me throw it back up to Lori Dew for a moment, Lori, and let you carry it for a while.
All right, that sounds great, Brian. Thank you very much, because as you were talking about that and showing the video, I have my panel here in New York that was watching it and would like to weigh in on it as well. Captain David Christian, what Brian was saying just a minute ago, you've got what could be, the camera behind what could be an enemy position, and yet it appeared to all of us that the camera was still rolling even after this attack, whatever it was. I know you're just seeing this for the first time or looking at it again for the first time, but what do you make of it?
When I witnessed it the first time Brian aired it, I saw the explosions. I knew that they were bullets, and it's either bullets going in or bullets coming out. There were concussions that they were rocking.
There it is again.
And however, at the end of the whole scene, after the explosion, it seemed like they laid the camera down when the plane came by, and so after the F-14 went by, there was an explosion. But then the camera went back up. So what it shows to me that on both sides, cameramen are embedded. And the cameramen risk their lives. This cameraman evidently is still alive because here he is at the end of the scene. He's back up again after the big explosion, and he's showing the bridge scene again.
Well, it might have been someone else. We just don't know yet.
Well, that's true.
But again, it is important to point out that this is a very dangerous environment.
What I would like to maybe inquire with all of our panel, Bob, Brian, yourself, everybody, where are the M1 tanks that were coming from the west? As was established, we're bringing a couple M1 tanks from the west. We're going to bring in the east into the battle because there's two different wars there we're looking. The Tigris is separating two different wars. People are going to coffee shops on the one side. On the other side, the people are emerged in war and immersed in war, rather.